Right, so the Philadelphia Eagles, we're saying, are absolutely contenders in the NFC, them and the Lions at the very top of the division. We know that in the AFC, we have the Chiefs 10-1. We've got this brilliant Bills team who beat the Chiefs last weekend on a bye now. They're going to thrash the 49ers next weekend and go back on a roll. There is another team in the AFC that people are really looking at as a possible contender, who are sneaking up from the back, who aren't leading their division right now, who had a tough loss to the Steelers a couple of weeks ago. But the Ravens go into Los Angeles. They beat the Chargers on Monday night. They look very, very impressive doing it. And suddenly I'm hearing a lot of buzz around that offense being the best in the league and then being a possible Super Bowl team.
I feel like we've been doing this all season with the Baltimore Ravens, right?
Yeah, right.
Like 1 week, they let you down. What's going on with the Ravens? Is Lamar Jackson going to fail again in the playoffs? And next week, Lamar Jackson's the MVP. Oh my gosh, Derrick Henry is the king rusher of the NFL. John Harbaugh is the most underrated coach in the NFL. All those things. My issue with the Ravens all season has been their lack of consistency. Personally, I don't think going to Los Angeles and winning is that big of a deal, because you could be a college team and win an NFL stadium in Los Angeles because they don't have fans there. They don't have,
But you know what? The Chargers on Monday, that's the loudest I've heard an LA home crowd.
It's all relative, right?
Like it is relative, but it feels like weirdly, despite the fact that the Rams won a Super Bowl in that city, feels like they're starting to really lean Chargers.
I will always think
there was a good number of
San
Chargers
Diego
fans
coming up for a long weekend. I don't think there were any real Chargers fans or Rams fans. I have been to LA after they won a Super Bowl. You can be there a week later and you don't see any Rams gear anywhere in LA. That's for another topic. So I don't think winning in LA is that big of a deal. But that is a good Chargers team. It's coached by one of the Harbaugh brothers. And I completely agree with you. We saw Baltimore remind everybody that, oh yeah, we're supposed to be Super Bowl contenders. We have Lamar Jackson, the two-time MVP. We have Derrick Henry, who's absolutely unstoppable. What I've always loved about this team, and why I've been waiting all season for this team to take that next step, because they're an all-weather team. They can win in September. They can win November. They can win in February. They can win in the Superdome. They're good enough to do that. They have past experience. They've had playoff failure. They've also won a Super Bowl. Like that, they have every ingredient that you want. The only thing missing is, can Lamar Jackson in the AFC Championship, can he be efficient enough? Can he not try to do too much? I remember we spoke at talkSPORT.com with a Baltimore columnist, Kyle Goon, and he was saying, one of the issues for Lamar Jackson is, does he try to do too much in the playoffs? Does at some point, and we saw that the last couple of years, does he put it on himself and I'm going to win this? Well, that's not really what Patrick Mahomes does. Patrick Mahomes makes the incredible moves, the incredible throw, and he sets up Travis Kelce, DeAndre Hopkins. But in the end, this is a Baltimore team, Will, that should be there. I just don't know. Their lack of consistency this season has troubled me since week one.
My feeling on this sudden hot topic of the Ravens being amazing, it's an isolation game on Monday, right? Whenever it's standalone and a team performs really well, we are destined to hype them up. Now, we sat in these seats last week and we talked about the brilliant job Jim Harbaugh had done, about taking a defense which lacked big names, the big names were injured, and had really, really trained them up to a high level, was getting Justin Herbert looking like a superstar, and really, really, like, they could be the dark horse team. The problem is that the way the Chargers played on Monday night was utterly pathetic. That was one of the worst performances I've seen from a team all season. Between the fact that on offense, they're throwing the ball all over the place, and yet Quentin Johnston, a first-round pick, has 5 targets, 3 drops, no catches. The second receiver on that team has 8 targets, 3 catches for 38 yards. Nothing there to help Justin Herbert out. And suddenly, everyone's going, oh, the Ravens' pass defense has figured it out. No, if people don't catch balls, then you're not going to give up air yards. They didn't run the ball well. They weren't throwing the ball well. And then on defense, they were just leaving these holes all over the place for the Ravens. I thought the Ravens strolled that game on Monday night because the Chargers really didn't show up in a really disappointing fashion. Turns out that John absolutely has a number done on Jim.
3-0 versus his brother.
3-0 against his brother.
With a Super Bowl ring.
And then I had a little look into it. What do you think the record? The Chargers are 7-5. They are still in playoff contention, right? Do you know what the record of the 7 teams that they've beaten this season are?
I imagine it's not very good.
26-52.
Yeah, I don't believe in the Chargers. The Chargers are not doing anything real this year. I haven't believed in the Chargers all season. Jim Harbaugh's done a nice job. Jim Harbaugh has proved thus far that he can still coach in the NFL.
It shows that coaching matters, right?
It does, but
talent eventually shows that.
Yeah, and it's not like they're 9-2. They're not 10-1. They're not smoking everybody. They beat a bunch of bad teams. They don't have enough weapons on offense. I completely agree with you. You look at the receivers, it still feels like Justin Herbert is being underserved by the Los Angeles Chargers. You have a young quarterback who's on a rookie deal, who has one of the best arms in the last 20 years. And what does he really have around him? There's no part of me that believes that the Los Angeles Chargers are a true contender. They're the 12th best, 10th best team in the league, and that doesn't get you very far in the NFL.
And this for me is why I wanted to give you the example of how bad I thought the Chargers were on Monday, how disappointing they were, because it highlighted for me that the Ravens didn't fix any of their problems on Monday. The pass defense didn't suddenly get brilliant. The defensive backs didn't suddenly start absolutely lighting the world on fire. There were still huge holes in the zones. They still found the guys. The guys just dropped the ball when it was thrown to them. I still think the coaching on both sides of the ball is an issue. Zach Orr still hasn't figured out what that defense needs to look like for the Ravens, and there's a lack of talent up front compared with what they've had previously. Roquan Smith goes out of the game, and the very, very first drive, the Chargers pick them apart down the field, like tear them a new one. And I was terrified they were going to get thrashed until the Chargers fell off a cliff. And then on the offensive side of the ball, it's all Lamar Jackson, it's all Derrick Henry. But once you go up against a team who know how to stop that,
and that's what we saw. And that's what we saw. What I still think about the Ravens is that loss to the Steelers. That loss to the Steelers was concerning to me because it's not about being 8-3 or 9-2. If you're the Baltimore Ravens, the story the entire season was, can they take the next step? Can they be better than Chiefs? Can they reach the Super Bowl? Can Lamar Jackson truly deliver? Anyone in the NFL would take one Super Bowl ring over 3 MVPs. That's a really, really simple equation. There's no math to work out. One Super Bowl ring is worth 50, 100 MVPs, and they still have to prove it to me because every time I want to think that the Ravens have found it this year. The Ravens, they have consistency. This is the team that's going to take the next step. They lose to Pittsburgh. They lose to Russell Wilson. They don't look good when they play the Steelers. And they're still in second place in their division. There's no guarantee they're winning their division.
I look at the teams in the playoff picture right now. Pittsburgh, Kansas City when they're on their day, Buffalo, particularly if they're healthy on defense, Matt Milano coming back, the Broncos even.
Yeah.
And I look at all of those teams and I think they can all stop the run. They can all stop Derrick Henry. Like, Lamar Jackson is going to have to do something very special.
And usually when Lamar has to take that next step, he ends up throwing a couple picks. That's what's happened in the past. I hope it changes for him. I'm tired of having to talk about, can Lamar Jackson win a Super Bowl? Yes, he is talented enough to win a Super Bowl. Is he going to do it with Baltimore? We're going to find out this year.
If the consensus goes the way it's going to go, and we've sat here and said Saquon Barkley and Josh Allen and fought our corners for them, but the consensus right now is Lamar Jackson for MVP.
Lamar Jackson will probably win the MVP.
So he's probably going to win the MVP. He may well make the AFC Championship game again. But a Ravens team who all of their years under John Harbaugh have been built on this stout defense, stopping the run, getting after the quarterback, just mauling teams up front, being brilliant in the trenches, don't have any of that anymore. And suddenly you're like, yeah, Lamar Jackson's great, but we're going to never win the big one. 3 MVPs is great, but you're wasting the talent of a 3 MVP guy. You start to look like Dan Marino on the Dolphins. You start to look like these teams who have unreal talent at the most important position and yet never get over the hump because it's the ultimate team sport. And I'm sorry, you can win 3 MVPs, but if you can't win in January, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I covered Lamar Jackson in college when he was at Louisville. I covered a game where I actually watched University of Houston and their defensive coordinator at the time just destroy him. I mean, they had a brilliant game plan. He wins the Heisman. He was. I mean, one of the dumbest things anyone said in the last 20 years in the NFL is that Lamar Jackson should have been a wide receiver. Lamar Jackson is a fantastic quarterback. He's one of the most talented. And I want to get this on the record because I occasionally deal with stuff on social media. People who think I hate Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is one of the most talented quarterbacks in NFL history, one of the greatest dual threats in NFL history. The only person I would actually think comparable to him would be Randall Cunningham, who was so far ahead of his time. And I would love to watch Randall Cunningham play in 2024. Has some Michael Vick with a dual threat. He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant, but he's been a letdown in the playoffs, and he's made bad decisions, and there's no way around it. I said this earlier. It feels like he tries to do too much sometimes, and that's going to your point, Will. Okay, if the run gets stopped and they don't have tremendous wide receivers, and Lamar, you have to put it on his shoulders. Can he do that? But ultimately, that's Baltimore letting him down. You can't have somebody that talented who might win his 3rd MVP before he's reached his prime and not be in a Super Bowl. That team, that roster, the offensive talent around him has to be better. So that's on the front office, that's on the coaching staff.
I tell you right now, if you take Lamar Jackson And let's even ignore the very top tier. Let's ignore the Bills. Let's ignore the Chiefs. If you take Lamar Jackson, you put him on this current Steelers team, this current Broncos team.
It'd be a fun team.
This current Dolphins team. I would back the Dolphins with Lamar Jackson to go to the Super Bowl.
I would replace the head coach. I'm not sure that Mike McDaniel's a Super Bowl winning coach. But
I love the idea of Mike McDaniels and Lamar Jackson together. That's
right,
exciting
because that's like what NFL, I'm not saying you're an NFL nerd. That's what
I am an NFL nerd. That's fine. You can just say
on
that.
Social media, playing video games, fantasy football. Like, oh my God, give me Mike McDaniel with Lamar Jackson, and you're going to go 9-8 because that's how it goes. But I completely agree with you. Lamar Jackson, I can't make it any more clear. He's brilliant. He's one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history when it comes to pure talent. His team is not good enough, but it also starts at the top. If your quarterback, if your franchise quarterback is unpredictable at times, makes mental mistakes at times, tries to do too much at times, spends games running backwards and gets sacked for 20 yards or throws a couple picks, at some point, that's going to kill you in the playoffs. And recent history has shown that's always what happens. I hope he changes his story, but that's on him and that's on the Ravens.